Whether you're new to Valorant or at an intermediate level, it can be hard to understand why you died, let alone how to adapt. A lot of us start by asking, is it my aim? My reaction time? Did I just not understand the game? Trying to improve, you dive into coaching videos, guides, and aim drills, only to keep dying, just a bit more informed. Was it bad movement? Poor utility usage? Hey, maybe my crosshair just wasn't head level. In this video, my goal is to help you understand why you're dying in most situations and give you a solid foundation to build on. Critical thinking and self-awareness are key, but this foundation will help you make progress. To understand why we're dying, we must first understand what it is we should be looking for in Valorant, and if we're finding it. I'm referring to duels, a fair fight between two players, a 1v1. Sure, Valorant is a team-based game and it often feels like you're up against multiple threats, but with a solid understanding of duels and how to take them, it can all become more manageable. There are 4 ways to take duels, and just like utility, each has its place. Choosing the right one depends on the situation. Your options are holding an angle,
One enemy remaining.
slow peeking,
Last player standing.
default peeking, and wide swinging.
No hard feelings.
Believe it or not, understanding when and how to use each of these will make diagnosing your deaths much easier. Let's start with holding an angle. Before we dive in, it's important to understand that each type of duel is an art form. Each requires practice and repetition. I can't cover every possible situation, but I'll give you the basics to build from. There are many reasons to hold an angle, typically as a defensive tool when you expect an enemy to round the corner. You position your crosshair at head height, adjusting the angle based on the situation. If there's silence, tighten the angle. If you hear running, widen it. When the enemy agent moves onto your crosshair, left click and take them out. Remember, you should never adjust your crosshair for the initial shot, just wait for the enemy to walk into it. Slow peeking is more nuanced and a lot more dangerous, so timing is everything. When you slow peek, meaning you shift walk around a corner, the goal is to stay unnoticed. But if you slow peek into a site that's being held, you're basically asking to get one-tapped by someone holding the angle. Choosing to slow peek means you don't expect enemies to be holding the angle. You want silence. A perfect example would be a Cypher lurking mid, looking for a rotation kill or setting up a flank. The steps to slow peek are quite simple. Get as far away from the wall as you can and shift walk around the corner, moving your crosshair in a sweeping motion across the exposed area. Next is default peeking. You often will not hear this called default peeking, but rather just peeking. This typically involves slicing the pie to check the threat angles one at a time, in hopes that you find a 1v1 duel, or to just clear the angles so you know it's safe. This isn't done by shift walking, but by moving just 1 or 2 steps so you aren't making noise. Each slice of the pie will vary in size depending on the map. Here's how it works. Like slow peeking, start as far from the wall as you can. Aim at head height where the first threat might appear. Move just enough to get a clear line of sight without making noise. Pause. Do you see anyone? If yes, micro adjust and shoot. If not, move your crosshair to the next likely spot and take another silent step. Be careful. Going too fast can make noise or cause you to miss someone you did see. Wide swinging, like slow peeking, is very nuanced. It's powerful when used right, but reckless when done blindly. If you wide swing without info, you're likely walking into a 50-50 duel or worse, and gambling your life. The real strength of a wide swing is disrupting the enemy's crosshair placement. Say you missed a shot with a default peek and fell back behind cover. If you repeat the same peek, they're already primed and locked onto your head. Instead, wide swing to throw off their aim. Unlike other peeks, you want to hug the wall, hold A or D, and as the enemy appears, track and adjust your aim. Don't stop moving until you're ready to shoot, then stop and fire. This is also why wide swinging is risky. If you haven't cleared every angle, you might get one kill, but you could also expose yourself to players you didn't spot and end up dead. Okay, great, but what does this have to do with you dying? Well, with our fundamental understanding of the 4 duel types, let's set up some questions we can ask, and then we'll be able to diagnose what happened. Okay, so this part isn't going to be as scripted, so bear with me. I made a flowchart that I will allow you guys access to in the description below. But here are the questions. The first thing we need to ask ourselves was it even a duel? So if we say yes, it was a duel, we can then think about other things. Like, I was holding an angle and got peeked or swung. Okay, so did I hold the angle correctly? Or did I mistime my shot? Well, if I didn't hold the angle correctly, did I hear movement? Because if I did, maybe I should try holding the angle a little bit wider. If I didn't, maybe I should hold it a little bit tighter. Or we could say, yes, it was a duel. I peeked or swung, but I was too slow. Well, this is likely just practice and experience. Keep going. This typically just means that you aren't as seasoned as the person you peeked. So if you failed at the micro adjustment and like you just didn't quite have it in time, do it more often, do it more frequently, and you'll start to do it faster. Okay, yes, it was a duel. I peeked, swung, but I panic fired. So in this case, you need to force yourself to play DM and TDM. You really want to get used to that pressure, like, oh, the time pressure, like, oh God. What you need to do is breathe and stay grounded even in those moments, because you have to realize none of this matters anyway. And something you can do is search for calm aim on YouTube if you've never heard of that. Okay, I peeked/swung, but had movement error in my shooting. Well, in this case, you need to practice Valorant's movement, because you'd be surprised, Valorant movement is like half the game. I personally really like the Woohoojin drill. It's in the flowchart. I will gladly let you guys use, and I'll leave a link to it in the description below. Or I peeked/swung, but I had a ton of shooting error from shooting too fast/too much. So this is also a pretty easy fix. Basically, you go into the shooting range with whatever gun it was and just start practicing left clicking as fast as you can without getting that shooting error. However, there are exceptions. So you'll see it doesn't include the frenzy, because you just hold the left mouse button when you're up close. SMGs, same thing. The Ares, the Odin, and then you have the Phantom and the Vandal. Now the Phantom and the Vandal do eventually have shooting error, and you're not technically supposed to spray them, but there are exceptions because typically you want to burst the first like 5 rounds, specifically on the Vandal, and you can learn to pull down slightly. But that's advanced tech, don't worry about that. If you are getting shooting error and it's not one of those guns, for now, just go to the shooting range, play with them, keep hitting that button, just keep clicking, and get used to how fast you're able to click it. So that's the yes side. The no side is where we're gonna have to do a lot of learning, because if we're not taking duels correctly, then we need to start figuring things out. So now we're on the no side, and let's say I got shot in the back. So therefore, for you, it wasn't a duel, you just got shot in the back. Well, there's things to consider. Were we on the attacking side or were we on the defending side? If we're on the attacking side, where did it happen? Well, if you were still getting to site, like let's say you're attacking, you haven't quite made it to the site, well then that means there's 2 things you should consider. Your sentinels are providing information, or at least they should be, about what's going on in the flank. You're talking cipher trips, you're talking the vise wall, the chamber little dome thing, I forget what it's called. However, you cannot rely on this. This is just playing games and playing games and playing games. And the reason for that is because you need to have a sense of how long it's going to take for a flank to show up. Because if your team is sitting in one spot for X amount of time, then at some point you should expect that the flank is now a danger zone and a threat line that you need to be worried about. I didn't fill out that I was lurking, that's a mistake, but I'm actually gonna plug it in right here because it's roughly the same thing. If you're lurking, like you're in the mid and you get shot in the back, then therefore you were in a threat line that you, 1, weren't watching, and 2, they had time to make it to. Now, if you were on site and you got shot in the back, there's two things you really need to consider. The first is make sure you're clearing angles. Were you actually taking the time to cut the pie, and it can be quickly, around those different angles to try to make sure the sight was clear? If you did do that and the sight was clear, then I would highly consider your positioning to be the issue. That is because if you're getting shot in the back, you're probably exposed to multiple threat lines. What do I mean by threat line? I simply mean it's a location where an enemy could shoot you from. So either way, it's going to be your positioning, because you're either not looking where the enemy could come from, or you're exposed to too many threat lines. Okay, so it wasn't a duel. I got shot in the back, but we were defending. If it's early in the round, you need to consider your positioning. When you're on defense, it's pretty hard to expose yourself to multiple threat lines without intentionally putting yourself in a bad position. And if you're shot in the back, that's even worse, especially early in the round on defending. So you'll notice a common theme, by the way, with the I got shot in the back is 1, getting a sense for timing, and 2, those threat lines. Keep these things in your mind whenever you're choosing where to stand. It's kind of overwhelming at first, especially when you don't know the maps, but it's vital in order to play the game at a high level. If you were defending, it was late in the round, but you got shot in the back, there's different things you can consider. 1, did you have information? Like maybe there was some stuff on the minimap that you missed. Maybe one of your teammates did a call out. Maybe they were pinging the minimap. Maybe you just didn't use the information you had available. How many threat lines was I open to? And was I listening for footsteps? If you basically didn't have info, you were exposed to like maybe 1 or 2 threat lines and you didn't hear footsteps, this can happen to all of us. I mean, the best thing you can do is consider your position and try to get as much information as you possibly can. And sometimes it's just gonna happen, especially the later into the round it goes, because the more variable of where enemies could be are. All right, was it even a duel? No. Okay, I peek/swung and there was more than one enemy. Well, if you slow peek and there's more than one enemy, then you either should have ran, as in like you should have just back under the cover of the wall, or if you tried but died, like tried to run but you died, that's kind of the danger of slow peeking. The best thing you can do is play for information. If you can get info before peeking, always take that option. Especially if the goal is I'm gonna have to slow peek, because if someone's holding the angle correctly, they will almost always win that duel. They won't always. We're human, everyone makes mistakes, but slow peeking a held angle is a one-way trip to whatever you believe is the afterlife. If you default peeked but there was more than one enemy, you're peeking incorrectly. So the whole goal of a default peek is to check those threat lines one at a time and only expose yourself to the threat line that you're checking, and of course the previous ones that you've already checked. So therefore, if you're peeking, like doing a default peek, and you see multiple enemies, then you need to practice peeking that angle, because you should never see multiple enemies. Now, occasionally you might come across something like a high-low. That's where one person is standing and one is crouched, or someone's on an object and the person in front of them isn't on an object. But that's not something you're going to come across very often. And if you do, it is a valid strategy to fight against default peeking. And the best thing you can do in that situation is accept that you were going to die, or you got to try to find information. Again, information is king. So no, it wasn't a duel because I swung and there was more than one enemy, and it was a wide swing. Well, this is for emergencies or follow-ups. So basically, you should never wide swing without information unless it's like, I'm the last one alive, there's 3 of them, maybe I can cheese a kill or 2. Not a great idea. As for the follow-up, if you do a default peek and then tuck and cover, like because you missed, like let's say you default peek, found one, you missed, so you go back into cover, which should always be the follow-up on a miss, by the way, then you can't just re-peek, because if you just re-peek, they're gonna have their crosshair where your head just was, so you're just gonna get shot immediately. So the best thing you can do in that case, especially if you know it's a 1v1, move forward, hug the wall, wide swing, and their crosshair is completely out of position. This also gives you the opportunity to, while you're wide swinging, track, aim, stop, fire. No, it wasn't a duel. Utility moved me from my position, blinded me, or stunned me. So unfortunately, that's Valorant. That's the game you're playing. And if they successfully use their utility to get you out of a position, that's just them playing correctly. However, it's always a lesson, right? If you are moved out of a position because of a certain form of utility, consider that agent. When you go to position yourself on a site or even aggressively, whatever it is, consider that agent because you just saw how their utility is going to work against you. Other things to consider are which ultimates are currently available. And it's also really important to know your escape route. I have survived many flashes while completely blind simply because I knew where I needed to go before the blind even showed up.
Cage triggered.
And last but not least, no, it wasn't a duel because the enemy swung me, but there was multiple people. So this usually only happens for two reasons. One, they're playing smart and they double swinged you, or two, it's because you're defending the site that they're trying to take. So if this happens and you're on the site that they're taking, this typically means that you're just too far forward without an escape plan. You living is always going to be better than trying to hold the site long enough for you to get like a pick. You being alive lets you play off of your teammates in ways that make it so duels are unfair for the enemy. However, when you die, yes, you may get a pick, and that's like best case scenario, but now you have no more input for how the round is going to go. There are rounds, I play Cypher, and there are rounds I won't even hold the angle. If I know that there's a chance that they're going to rush my site or 5 people are going to show up like pretty quickly, I will set things up so we get the information, but I will just let them have the site. And the reason for this is because, again, being alive is always going to be better than dying. Specifically on defense, and specifically so you can influence the round. Because technically you could just take what I just said and then hide the whole time, but you know what I mean. Now, if they double swung you, if it's by surprise, congratulations, they get a win. It's a valid tactic. It is what it is. You're playing Valorant. So the best thing you can do is consider, why is it they had the opportunity to double swing me? Was my position really aggressive and they knew where I was at? But if it wasn't a surprise, you probably shouldn't have been holding the angle. If you're getting double swung and it's not a surprise, then you're probably doing it out of KDA and ego. Like you're like, oh, I'm gonna get 2. And yes, sometimes those plays are fun to do. Sometimes those plays pay off, but you have to understand that those plays, like whenever you get 2 people that double swung you, is their mistake and not your skill. Anyway, I hope you guys enjoyed this video. I'm going to find a way to make sure you guys have access to this so you guys can reference it if you need it. But understanding those 4 dueling fundamentals is going to help you guys understand why you died and if you were even playing a situation correctly to begin with. If you'd like to support me, I have a Patreon down below. I also upload on my main channel if you want to learn how to make games in Unreal Engine 5. Please like, comment, and subscribe, and I'll see you guys in the next video.